You're gonna be the prettiest girl there. Wait till Father Tom sees you. What the hell kind of a line is that? Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a kind of an older horror movie from 1976. It's actually really cool. When I first saw this, I don't know, probably, when did this DVD come out? I got this DVD says 1999, so I probably saw this, I don't know, early 2000s, possibly 2001 or something like that. I'm coming at you to review Alice, Sweet Alice, that I think is pretty much what this movie goes by these days. It was originally, filmed and released as Communion, which is a really, you want to talk about a creepy title, there's a creepy title for you there. And it didn't really do so well. And then I think, in 78, I think a couple years later, it was re-released as Alice, Sweet Alice, or something like that. And I want to say, a couple years later after that, maybe 80 or 81, it was, some distributor butchered it and released it as, I don't know, some Holy Terror or something else or whatever. But I think generally the title Alice, Sweet Alice is pretty much the title this particular movie's known for. This is the Anchor Bay DVD from 1999. It's widescreen 185, commentary with director and editor, talent bios, still gallery, alternate opening credits. This is not even 16 by 9 anamorphic 185. You got to zoom it in on your widescreen TV. So this is, I think, the only version of this movie I have. I don't think I have it on VHS or anything like that. So I don't know, it just, this movie, or this DVD was just in a pile that, this one pile that's just been a pile for years and years and years. And, it's funny how, I don't know about you guys, but, I've got piles of DVDs and Blu-rays all around, and I kind of have this mental, I generally tend to keep them in the same spot. I have this mental inventory in my head, and it's just like all of a sudden this title popped into my mind, and I knew exactly what pile it was in, and I just like, what, I haven't seen this movie in forever. So let's dig it out of the pile and revisit it. And upon, rewatching this, I was like, holy crap. I remember this movie being good, but holy crap, this is good. And I should say that, when I say this movie's good, it's kind of like the first hour. For me, the last half hour kind of isn't that great. But, the first hour of this movie, in my opinion, is really, really fantastic. So basically, this movie opens with a really, really cool opening credits sequence. One thing that I will say about this movie is it has got a really, really, really cool Roman Polanski / Alfred Hitchcock feel to it. If there were no credits in this movie, you'd swear Roman Polanski made this movie, and I'm not trying to take away from Alfred's soul by any stretch of the imagination, but the visual and editorial style on a technical standpoint of this movie is really, really cool for any of you people who are interested in film style and, Polanski / Hitchcock kind of filmmaking and stuff. This movie is, you gotta see this movie if you like that kind of filmmaking. The opening credits is really cool, where it's just like there's this picture of this, maybe this praying individual or something, a praying girl or something like that, just sitting there. I don't know if you can hear mumbling, supposed to be praying or confession or some kind of, I'm anti-religious, so I don't know of any of these, cult ritual things that they do or whatever. But this figures on one side of the screen, and the credits I think are happening on the other side of the screen. And when the opening credits are kind of relatively short. When the opening credits are done, it looks like this girl or this individual, I think it's supposed to be like a girl, it looks like the whole time she's praying, with her head down, holding a crucifix. And when the credits are over, there's this really cool animation. It's these are pictures, but taken in a succession or whatever, and it looks like an animation where with both hands this character will raise a crucifix and there'll be a knife on the bottom of it. And it's just right off the bat at the end of the opening credits, you're just oh man, that's really, really, really cool. So obviously, being a movie originally titled Communion, this has got a lot of, if you're scared by religion like I am, and, just hate the whole idea of it and hate the fact that people do this, millions and millions of people buy into this and fall for this bullshit, this movie might negatively affect you kind of as it did me. I mean, frankly, to be honest, this is a horror movie, or, well, I don't know if you really call it a horror movie. Maybe it's a thriller or something like that with horror movie elements. But it's kind of, it's a horror-ish movie or whatever. And frankly, I mean, the scariest scenes are just the ones where these people, these cult members of this particular church or whatever, are just in the church doing their ritual, just religious bullshit. I mean, just, seeing all that just crappy, nasty stuff that goes on inside the church is this, scariest part of this movie. Don't let me forget to mention that this movie also features a 9-year-old Brooke Shields, I think, in her very first film role. I think she plays, I can't remember, I don't know if she plays the little sister of Alice, or if it's a cousin, I don't know, but she plays this young girl that is, Alice, the main character, which is Alice, torments. Alice wears this like raincoat and this creepy ass frickin', mask with, just plastic mask. It's really, really creepy and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, I just did some couple videos about upcoming NECA action figures. It'd be cool. I mean, this movie is obviously very, very, not necessarily that well known, but an Alice action figure would actually be kind of cool in her little, raincoat with the removable, creepy plastic mask and a knife or whatever, and maybe she could come with the Bible. Who the hell knows? But anyway, Brooke Shields is briefly featured at the beginning of this movie, and Alice torments her and scares her wearing this mask and stuff. And I think Alice even torments other people, tenants of the apartment building, she lives in with her mom or whatever. This movie was filmed in like the mid 70s, but it takes place in, I think, the earlier mid 60s. And I gotta tell you, I mean, although it was only like 10 years, the movie takes place only 10 or 15 years or so prior to when it was made. It really, really feels, it feels like it actually, again, if I wouldn't have known when this movie was actually made, you'd think it was actually made in the 60s. They did the production design and the vehicles and the fashions and the hairstyles and everything so remarkably well that you'd think this movie was actually made in the year that it takes place in the movie. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure why they went through the extra expense of having this movie take place, 10 or so odd years before, this movie was filmed. It just seems like, I don't know if this was some kind of a novel or something that they made into the movie. It just seems like an unnecessary expenditure to have to do all this extra, spend all this money and time on cars and hairstyles and fashions and stuff when you don't need to. So I don't know why they did the kind of 60s period thing, but it's really, really well done. Oh man, there's this big, huge, real-life fat guy who I think lives in, I don't know where he lives. I was going to say he lives in the basement, but maybe he doesn't live in the basement. It doesn't really matter. But this fat guy, I think, is the landlord, which is kind of, fitting, because this guy doesn't work or do anything. He just owns this apartment building and just sits up in his room and is brought in meals and stuff by appreciative tenants and shit, and people just bring him money. And I mean, he just basically probably, for all intents and purposes, probably doesn't leave, his apartment or whatever. This big fat kind of, at the risk of being mean, this big fat character is actually really, really, fat for real and really, really nasty in this movie. He's just a character that kind of torments Alice, and I think she kind of ends up tormenting him back and all this kind of stuff. This guy's got all kinds of cats, just around his apartment and stuff, and he's just, I think his voice is dubbed. It appears like, maybe they didn't use the original actor's or the original fat guy's voice, and maybe they dubbed it, but yeah, that guy is just fat and just, oh my gosh, just like food and nasty stuff just spilled down his front of his shirt and I don't know what. So I saw this quite a while ago now. I should have reviewed it sooner, but oh well. So I can't exactly remember. I mean, doing beat by beats isn't really necessary anyway. The first, 15 or 20 minutes of this movie just kind of just lays down the groundwork. I think Alice's parents are divorced. She lives with her mom, and the woman who plays her mom, by the way, is holy crap. She's really sexy and has this really, really, sexy ass attractive face, and in particular with the 60s hairdo and stuff, this woman looks so, like, her face is just oh my gosh, you actually just want to chew her face up. It's just such a great looking face, and again with that 60s hairstyle, oh my gosh. So I think I'll end my, gushing or obsession over this woman's face at this point and just say that, wow, what a face. So as I said, the parents are divorced. I don't remember, I can't remember the dad. I don't remember. I guess it doesn't really matter what the dad does or whatever. But then this woman who's the mother of Alice has a sister, and I don't know if they live together or in the same apartment building or what. But she's got a child. I don't remember if that child is Brooke Shields or not. I don't know. Who knows? But I might as well just say it. I mean, basically, I don't know if it's 20 minutes into the movie or something, there's a creepy-ass, communion or frickin' whatever, religious scene or whatever, and Alice is just running around, or someone, I should rephrase that. Someone, of course now okay, whatever. Someone who appears to be Alice, okay, I probably spilled the beans already, but someone who appears to be Alice in that, whatchamacallit, the yellow raincoat and the creepy plastic mask is running around and chasing Brooke Shields or whatever. And at one point, we do see 20 minutes in the movie or something, or maybe 30, I don't know, that Brooke Shields' character is in fact, accosted and killed by what would appear to be Alice and put in this little, I don't know, this thing, and this looks like a coffin, but it's not a coffin, and put a candle in there and it's shut or whatever. During, I think, communion, and then the smoke starts coming from this place where this, the body was put, and someone discovers the body, and it's just like, oh my god, this pandemonium at communion or whatever, and it's just a horrific scene. And at this point, obviously, we're just like, oh my god, Alice, I don't know if Alice was jealous. I think Alice was jealous of this Brooke Shields character because she's like, gets all the attention, and maybe the pretty young sister or cousin or whoever the hell she is to Alice or whatever. So that's why she torments her, and at this point where I guess we're led to believe that she killed her. Oh my god. And everyone, the parents and stuff, discover it, and it's just like, oh my gosh, what a horrific scene. Oh yeah, for you Friday the 13th, 1980 fans, this movie was probably filmed in Jersey, I would imagine, because the woman who would end up being the woman at the diner in Friday the 13th, 1980 makes a couple appearances, I think, very brief background appearances as like a woman cop or something at the police station or whatever. I think she's seen in an elevator at one point, and possibly in a later scene later on, but she doesn't have any dialogue. But first time I saw this in the early 2000s or whatever, I was like, oh wow, that's that woman who would go on to be in Friday the 13th, 1980 as the woman at the diner. How fun. As this movie goes on, 30-minute mark, and just continues to wear on for the next 30 minutes or whatever, it was just like, oh my gosh, the movies now are generally, and I don't see a lot of movies now, but I'd say generally, obviously, movies now are just pretty much, they're just filmed, and it just doesn't really matter. I mean, the best you can say about movies now is like they're in focus, and that's pretty much it. And then some editor just hacks it up and cuts stuff up to make some kind of, in a lot of cases, not so coherent structure or whatever. But and with movies being mostly just filmed sloppily or lazily or just not interestingly, when you watch a movie like this, you're just like reminded so much of like, oh my god, like the mastery that can be done in regards to just the lenses used, the angles used, just the particular, the angles, and then the editor's usage of the footage filmed. Oh my god, I can't stress enough how I'd say nearly every shot, more than half of the shots in this movie are just like framed so cool, just in a way that's just like, oh my god, like geez, just taking stuff that's just, would otherwise just be boring footage in an apartment building or boring footage in a church or whatever, what could ordinarily just be boring footage. Whoever, the director, I'm assuming, shot in such an, or whoever, if it was the director's idea to put the camera where it was, or the, cinematographer's idea, whoever shot this movie, or whoever had the ideas for the angles and the, stuff for this movie, I can't stress enough how freaking amazing visually this movie is. like as I said at the beginning of the review, if you're a connoisseur of Polanski and Hitchcock and stuff, and you haven't seen this movie, you owe it to yourself to check this out. For if nothing else, just the mastery of the kind of the cinematic style, or the mastery of the cinematic medium of this movie in a technical standpoint is just, I mean, I completely and totally eat this stuff up, and not having. I don't watch a whole hell of a lot of 60s movies like Polanski stuff now or Hitchcock stuff, and having not seen something like this for such a long time. At this point, when I saw this again, I was just like, wow, the visual style is so cool. So I don't know, maybe halfway through the movie or something like that, there's this altercation between, like, I don't know, I think Alice's mom has Alice bring the fat landlord guy some food or cake or something. It's really nasty that they bring this guy, like cake, when this guy should not be eating cake, like probably for the rest of his life. But nevertheless, these appreciative tenants bring this fat ass cake, and it's just like, here you go. And I think this guy kind of traps Alice in his apartment, and he's just like, just looking all nasty, and like, this Alice girl was supposed to be 12, but the actress that actually played her was 19 at the time. This guy shuts her in and approaches her with this pedophile face, and like, heh heh heh. And this scene is really nasty, being a fan, of course, of kittens. I mean, who the hell doesn't like kittens? I mean, I basically like animals in general and don't really like their, mistreated, them to be mistreated at all, let alone just for a freaking movie. But there's this nasty scene. It looks real, and I hope this cat wasn't hurt. This kitten, by the way. Where this guy's got all kinds of cats and kittens hanging around his apartment, and this guy's like got her up against the door and is like threatening some kind of pedophile action against her, and she takes this kitten next to her on this shelf or this bookcase or whatever, and she grabs it by the neck and just like yanks it off the shelf and is holding it by the neck and is like saying, "Let me out of here or else." And it's like, oh my God, that's like a real kitten, and it looks like she really did that. And when I saw that, I was just like, oh my God, that kind of, I don't appreciate that. So if, I mean, I wouldn't not watch this movie, but just be warned, like, when this scene happens, maybe you might want to block, put your hand in front of the screen or something when that happens to not see that, because, being a lover of animals, and in particular early kittens, that was really, really difficult to watch. So that's one thing I can say about this movie that I don't appreciate one bit. I mean, it wouldn't have been very difficult to have just a fake kitten to make a cut and do that with, but oh my gosh. Maybe the halfway point of this movie or something like that, Alice's aunt, so she must live in if not with Alice's mom, she must live in the same building or something like that. It doesn't really matter. She was there in this scene, we'll put it that way. Alice's aunt gets attacked by an individual dressed up in, in the raincoat and the mask and stuff. And this scene is really cool. It's like, instead of the shower scene from Psycho, it's like the staircase scene from Alice, Sweet Alice. It's kind of the staircase equivalent of the shower scene in Psycho, where this woman, Alice's aunt, is attacked by this character, this individual, with a butcher knife on the staircase. And it's just, again, it's just shot and cut with such just a cool Hitchcockian, Polanskian just flair that it's just so cool. Obviously at this point, we're supposed to think that it's Alice. Obviously she's wearing, this character's wearing Alice's, Alice's whatever raincoat and mask and stuff that we saw her in at the beginning of the movie and stuff. So we're just kind of, as a viewer, assuming this is Alice, and her aunt is attacked and I think stabbed at least once, maybe more than once. But her aunt lives, I think, or at least lives long enough to be, I don't remember. I would imagine the character lives, but there's a really cool scene with her later on in the hospital room when the aunt's laying in bed and stuff, and the sister's coming to talk to her and stuff. And this woman's acting in this scene is absolutely amazing, where she's like, "It was Alice!" and just, she's breaking down in hysterics, and it's just like, oh my God, not only does this movie have absolutely fantastic, just the way it was shot and cut and stuff, but there's some really, really, really great acting in this movie as well, particularly by this woman in this scene. It's really, really cool stuff. This movie would be absolutely fantastic if it didn't revolve so much around, religious cult shit and kitten abuse. This is a part in the movie that's probably around the hour mark where, for my money, the last half of this movie really isn't interesting. Where Alice is now taken into custody, and they polygraph Alice. That scene's kind of actually cool. I think I remember that scene being relatively cool, where they polygraph Alice and stuff like that. So for the rest of the movie, I think more or less Alice is locked up in this, this whatever juvenile place or whatever the hell she is, being studied or whatever, to see if in fact she was the one, or she who did this, or could have potentially been the one who did this or whatever. So I don't know. Sometime within the last half hour of this movie, there's this scene where Alice's dad is summoned to this location to meet or whatever, and this individual dressed up in the same raincoat and mask and stuff like Alice at the beginning of the movie shows up and chases them up the stairs or whatever, attacks them or whatever. And it is a pretty cool scene, because at this point you're like, well, Alice is locked up, so I mean this really can't be her now at this point. And as the filmmaker probably knew that the audience were going to think that at this point or whatever, and just be like, well, Alice couldn't have broken out and been doing this stuff, so it's got to be someone else. But the scene where the father is killed, I don't remember, he's like knocked out or something, and it's like this old dilapidated warehouse, and he's on the 3rd or 4th floor or whatever, and there's these doors that are opened up, and the killer, he's like knocked out or something, I can't remember, and the killer is like pushing him, like, I don't know why he can't move, but whatever. Maybe he's tied up or something. He's tied up. But it's really kind of a cool scene, because he gets conscious or whatever, and he's just being rolled, like, I can't really describe it, but we'll just say he's being rolled towards this open doors or whatever, 3 or 4 stories up, and he's like, oh, it's a pretty cool scene, because it's just like, oh my god, there's nothing he can do or whatever. And I think he does being rolled out of this thing, and there's this cool shot where on the ground where there's like a mirror, and you see like a dummy or whatever in the mirror fall, and then the actual actor kind of just like lays back into the shot like, ugh, like he's hitting the ground. And again, it's a really interesting way to shoot it, really. I mean, who would even think of that? It was really kind of a cool way to shoot it. But this kill happens, in the last, I would say it probably lasts sometime in the last 30 minutes or whatever, and obviously as a viewer with any kind of, cognitive ability or whatever, you're kind of like at this point, well, this can't be Alice doing the killing because she's locked up. Oh yeah, I put on my notes here that at some point in the movie there's a Psycho poster, Psycho movie poster seen on the wall of, I don't know where the hell it is, but I just put it on my notes here, that Psycho poster seen on walls. So obviously this movie was supposed to have taken place sometime, 1960 or after, maybe 61 or something like that. But being a movie that has a lot of similarities in a visual style and stuff with Psycho, it's ironic and interesting that the filmmaker would pay homage to that movie by putting the poster for Psycho in this movie. So that's kind of cool. So obviously towards the end of the movie or whatever, I think there's a couple kills. One of them's her dad, and then luckily, or luckily, it's kind of perverted to say this, but luckily the fat character gets killed. Once again, this character always, when this character is doing these, killings and heinous deeds and stuff, the character's always dressed up in Alice's raincoat and plastic mask thing. And all I have on my notes here is, the way the fat guy, or the scene of the fat killer, or the fat landlord guy dying was cool, I wrote. So, I mean, I haven't seen this for weeks now, so I don't remember how the fat guy died, but apparently he died in a way where the scene was cool, so yay. There's this kind of running, running thing or theme throughout this movie that happens towards the beginning of the movie. Oh yeah, I think when the body of Brooke Shields' character is discovered, towards the beginning of the movie or whatever, after that character is killed, Alice was just about to get, they're at communion, and Alice was just about to get her lump of flesh or whatever that they pretend that this little wafer thing is, just about to get her lump of flesh on her tongue. When the body was discovered, it's like, ah, and like everyone, and she's like, left, just denied her lump of flesh, aka a wafer. So there's this running thing that happens at the beginning of the movie, and then happens again at the end, where there's another communion. How often do these assholes do communion? I mean, is it every quarter or so, every 3 months? I don't know how often I don't know how long this movie takes, the span of time this movie takes place over, but there's like a communion at the beginning of it and a communion at the end of it, so I don't know how often these assholes do communion. I guess as often as they damn well please, damn it. So at the end of the movie, this movie also takes place at communion. So I have it on my notes here that Alice once again was like on her knees and awaiting the lump of flesh on her tongue, and the actual killer reveals themselves. And I'm not going to spoil who it is in case you want to see it. It was something that was quite a, it was quite a surprise to me. I mean, when I rewatched this recently, I didn't remember at all who the hell the killer was. I basically assumed, it was just Alice, but of course it's not Alice. But the real killer is, revealed or whatever. And there's this kind of cool scene with the killer at the end of the movie, and in the church and communion and stuff. And Alice once again is denied her lump of flesh. That's just so funny. Although I would say that the last half hour of this movie isn't particularly great, primarily because it delves into the identity and of the actual killer and the motives of the actual killer. That's why I find the last third of this movie not particularly interesting. But I will say, like, the last scene, of the reveal of the killer and stuff to everyone else in the communion or in the church or whatever is really, really great. And I will say, just to hell with it, I'll just spoil this one fact by saying that this Father Tom, this character who's, featured predominantly throughout the movie and whatever, actually gets killed right at the altar or whatever, and it's just like, completely like unexpected to the audience and just to everyone watching. And when I watched it recently, I'm like, oh my god, that is so cool. Like, the last half hour of this movie might not be that great, but like the last few moments of it, it's just like, you just didn't see it coming, and it's just like, it's just so cool, and oh my gosh. So I'm going to give this movie 3.5 stars out of 4 stars. With the first half hour and first hour I was watching this, I was like, oh my god, this is such a 4-star movie. This is so awesome. How come I haven't seen this in so long? And then once we passed the hour mark and the kept wearing on for the last half hour, I understood why I kind of probably hadn't seen it in such a long time. But I mean, still, the first hour is really cool. The first half/first hour of this movie is absolutely fantastic. So as I said, I will give it 3.5 stars out of 4 stars. It'd be 4 stars if it, the last half for me would have been a little less tedious or whatever. And another thing I don't really like about it, obviously being a non-religious, or I should say anti-religious person, is obviously just this whole movie revolves. I mean, it was originally called Communion. The whole movie revolves around religion and this this ritual shit of communion and stuff that they all do and stuff. So that being an anti-religious person, that's something that's not exactly enjoyable to watch, is because this movie is on Blu-ray from 88 Films, and like when I was like halfway through it or an hour into it, I was like, oh my god, I think it's region-free Blu-ray by 88 Films, and I was just so gonna go on eBay and get me a copy of this. But by the time I ended this movie, I'm like, you know what? The DVD I got is fine, just because of, I don't know, it was really fun to watch or revisit again after not having seen it for such a long time, but it's not something that I necessarily can see myself watching very often. So I opted to not get the Blu-ray. But just if you didn't know it, or if you're interested in this movie, it is on 88 Films Blu-ray. I think, as I said, I'm pretty sure it's region free, which is really great. So I think that'll pretty much be my review of Alice, Sweet Alice, a movie that is, more or less absolutely phenomenal in just so many arenas. Like, everything it does, everything it does is actually really, really fantastic. And before I end the review, I think I forgot to mention how cool the music is. And the music is very Roman Polanski-ish, kind of Rosemary's Baby-ish. The music is absolutely really fantastic too. I mean, it's definitely a really, really amazing movie. To be honest, Criterion, this is a movie that would fit very well in a Criterion release. Like, it's just so artistic and so art house. It's so classy and just so many fronts. Music, production design, pretty much everything that it does it does fantastically, except for maybe, as I said, maybe just, last half hour of the movie maybe isn't that great, or at least for me. But it really should, instead of just having an 88 films release, this movie really should have a Criterion release, because, I think that Criterion's put out a lot worse movies than this, and this movie is just really, really masterful in a visual style or whatever. So, because I haven't said that in this review yet. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.